Today we're examining the haunting case of a young nurse who stepped into a nightclub for a friend's birthday and vanished minutes after walking out alone. As detectives pieced together her final route through dim city streets, scattered cameras revealed a silent figure moving behind her, raising chilling questions about what happened in the darkness that followed. For 3 years, Ana Varma lived in Raleigh with a routine that rarely changed. She worked 12-hour shifts at the county hospital, most of them overnight, and returned to a small apartment she kept in almost perfect order. Co-workers described her the same way every time: reliable, quiet, respectful, someone who completed her tasks and never asked for attention. She called her parents in India every Sunday at the same hour, and her life outside work was limited to grocery runs, cooking simple meals, and occasional visits with her closest friend, Priya. Nothing in her schedule suggested risk or instability. She avoided crowds, drank rarely, and preferred staying home over any social event involving noise or strangers. On the evening of Priya's birthday, Anya arrived at the restaurant wearing a navy dress she had worn to previous gatherings. She sat at the edge of the group, listening but not fully engaging as the others joked loudly. Even then, she planned to leave early. Her shift the night before had been long, and she felt worn out. She intended to stay for dinner, the cake, and then excuse herself politely. But when the group proposed continuing the celebration at a nearby nightclub, the pressure was immediate. Several friends urged her to come just for 1 hour, insisting it would be fun and harmless. Anya hesitated, but Priya encouraged her with a smile, and Anya eventually agreed, more out of loyalty than interest. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The nightclub was loud, dark, and crowded, a place Anya would never have chosen on her own. She stayed close to her group, keeping near the bar to avoid the center of the dance floor. Lights flashed in irregular patterns, and the music made normal conversation difficult. While the others moved in and out of the crowd, Anya remained near the wall, watching quietly. A few minutes after they arrived, a group of men approached the women. Most of them focused on Priya and the others, but one man, later identified as 32-year-old male Nolan Kent, fixed his attention on Anya almost immediately. He stepped close enough that she shifted her body away. He asked where she was from, leaned in too far to hear her answer, and blocked her path when she tried to step around him. Witnesses later said he appeared irritated when she declined his attempts to start a conversation. Security footage from inside the club confirmed the early interactions. On camera, Nolan positioned himself near her multiple times, narrowing the space around her. At one point, he offered her a drink and gestured toward the bar. Anya shook her head and stepped back. He laughed and made another attempt to close the distance. She avoided eye contact, moved toward her friends, and whispered something to Priya, who nodded briefly before returning to the group's conversation. As the night continued, the group moved toward the dance area. Anya joined only to avoid standing alone, but she remained near the edge. Nolan followed. Footage shows him touching her arm lightly while speaking. She immediately pulled away. It was the final signal for her. She leaned toward Priya again, said she was heading home, and did not wait for further discussion. She made her way through the side corridor that led to the lesser-used exit, avoiding the main crowd. The last interior camera recorded her pushing open the door, stepping outside, and pausing for a moment as she adjusted her purse strap. The timestamp marked the moment, 1:09 a.m. She appeared calm but ready to leave. Nothing in her posture suggested fear. She simply wanted to go home. She walked off-screen seconds later. Club patrons continued dancing, unaware that this routine moment would later become the starting point of a major missing person investigation. At that time, no one inside the building understood that the footage showing Anya leaving through the side exit would be the final confirmed images of her before she vanished into the night air, beginning a timeline that investigators would spend days trying to reconstruct. Outside the club, Anya stood under the shallow awning, away from the noise leaking through the door. She took out her phone and opened her rideshare app, intending to go straight home. The price shown on the screen was unusually high for that hour. She hesitated, checked it a second time, and then closed the app. She had taken late buses before and knew the main avenue a few blocks away remained active until nearly 2 a.m. Choosing the familiar option, she tightened her grip on her purse strap and began walking toward the better-lit street. The club's exterior camera captured her turning left, pausing briefly as she adjusted her bag, then continuing at a steady, unhurried pace. Investigators later noted that nothing about her body language suggested fear or concern. She glanced over her shoulder once, not in alarm, but in the way anyone might check their surroundings when leaving a crowded place. After that moment, she moved out of the camera's frame. 3 minutes later, the same camera recorded Nolan exiting the building alone. He stepped out quickly, looked both ways down the sidewalk, and then focused in the direction Anya had gone. Footage showed him checking his phone more than once, lifting it slightly as if comparing directions or message timestamps. Detectives would later slow this footage frame by frame, noting that he kept narrowing his gaze toward the intersection Anya had already reached. Municipal cameras helped reconstruct her path. At 1:12 a.m., a traffic camera near a convenience store recorded Anya walking past the storefront. Her pace was consistent, neither rushed nor wandering. At 1:14 a.m., a separate camera near a closed pharmacy captured her crossing the far corner, her silhouette briefly illuminated by a flickering streetlight. These recordings formed a continuous timeline of her movement through the district. The final confirmed footage came from a small boutique located on a quieter street. Its security camera, angled downward toward the windows, captured Anya walking along the sidewalk, her reflection moving across the dark glass. She did not appear aware of anyone behind her. 10 seconds after she cleared the frame, Nolan appeared. This time his posture looked different. His phone was still in his hand, but he held it lower. He was walking faster, shoulders slightly forward, as though focused on something ahead of him. Investigators later described this piece of footage as the backbone of the early suspicion. It placed both individuals on the same route, within seconds of one another, with a visible change in his behavior compared to his movements earlier inside the club. However, late-night recordings alone did not provide enough information to act immediately. It was only when Priya contacted police the next afternoon to report Anya missing that detectives began assembling the timeline more formally. Anya had not come to work, had not answered messages, and her phone appeared offline. Police requested the usage records from the regional transit system. Data showed that her transit card, usually used several times a week, had not been scanned since before the birthday dinner. This finding confirmed she had not boarded any bus after leaving the nightclub area. Detectives then examined her phone activity. Her device stopped transmitting at 1:19 a.m., dropping off the network entirely within a narrow 2-block corridor. Technicians explained that the signal loss in this specific area was common due to older infrastructure, but the complete absence of further activity raised immediate concern. No outgoing calls, no app usage, and no location updates appeared after that minute. Search teams were deployed that evening. Officers and volunteers walked the same blocks Anya had taken, reviewing the locations of cameras, alleys, loading zones, and poorly lit sections. They moved deliberately, pausing at the exact point where her phone stopped transmitting. This spot aligned with the edge of a small vacant lot situated between two older commercial buildings. The lot had no direct lighting, only a partial view from the street. From the sidewalk, it looked empty, but deeper inside the ground was uneven, scattered with broken concrete and overgrown patches of weeds. It was here, at the boundary of the lot and the limits of the recorded timeline, that the inquiry shifted from a routine missing person check into something far more serious, though investigators at that moment still did not know what they were about to uncover. The vacant lot behind the pharmacy was a narrow, uneven stretch of ground wedged between two older brick buildings. During the day it served as informal overflow parking, but at night it remained mostly unused. The second day of the search began with officers expanding the perimeter around the last known phone signal. When a canine unit passed near a section of disturbed soil along the chain-link fence, the dog alerted, prompting investigators to examine the area more closely. In the dirt they found Anya's purse. It was partially open, its contents scattered in a small radius. Nothing indicated theft. Her wallet remained inside, along with her ID and bank cards. Searchers found a broken necklace pendant a few feet away, lying on top of compacted soil, which suggested recent activity. The location of these items, combined with the state of the ground, pointed to some kind of struggle having taken place there. Investigators began a more detailed sweep. Near the fence, faint drag impressions led toward an old wooden shed positioned at the back edge of the lot. The marks were not immediately obvious but became clearer once officers followed them at an angle. They ran parallel to the fence for several feet before ending at the shed's weathered entrance. The shed itself had not been used in years, and its lock was broken. Inside, search teams documented several pieces of potential evidence. On one of the interior wooden beams, a dark transfer stain tested presumptively positive for blood. 2 long strands of hair were found stuck to the rough edge of the same beam. Their length and color were consistent with Anya's. The interior floor was covered with packed dirt and debris, but in one corner, a single latent shoe print was well preserved in dried mud. The tread showed a distinctive pattern with a chipped segment on the heel. Crime scene specialists took molds and high-resolution photographs for later comparison. While forensic technicians continued collecting samples, detectives canvassed the surrounding properties. A delivery driver who frequently parked near the alley told officers he remembered hearing raised voices the night before. He described a man and a woman arguing close to the lot entrance, though he could not identify either due to distance and lighting. His statement did, however, place 2 individuals in the immediate area at the time Anya disappeared, supporting the theory that a confrontation occurred near the lot. Later that afternoon, the medical examiner located Anya's body in a wooded area approximately 2 miles north of the lot. The discovery occurred after search crews followed a secondary trail of disturbed vegetation off a service road. The preliminary examination on site showed signs of manual strangulation. Bruising on her arms and wrists suggested a violent struggle, and her clothing exhibited tearing consistent with being grabbed or dragged. At the medical examiner's facility, technicians collected biological samples from beneath her fingernails. The initial report confirmed the presence of male DNA. These results, combined with the observable injuries, reinforced the conclusion that she had fought back against her attacker. Detectives revisited the surveillance timeline to determine who had been closest to her during the critical minutes before she vanished. They reviewed the boutique camera footage again, isolating and enhancing the frames showing Nolan walking behind her. Investigators focused on the distance between them, the timing of their appearances, and subtle posture changes that suggested intent or awareness. His proximity to her along the exact route, coupled with the disappearance occurring shortly after he entered the same area, became a central point in their analysis. The physical evidence from the lot and shed indicated that the attacker had stopped with her there before transporting her elsewhere. The drag marks, blood transfer, strands of hair, and distinctive shoe print provided a sequence that aligned with a targeted assault rather than a random encounter. The discovery of male DNA under her nails further strengthened the case. With this combination of surveillance links, physical evidence from the scene, and initial forensic findings, detectives determined they had probable cause to move forward with interviewing Nolan. The next phase of the investigation focused on his timeline, his movements that night, and whether his statements would align with the evidence already in hand. Detectives scheduled Nolan's first interview less than 24 hours after identifying him from the boutique camera footage. He arrived voluntarily and appeared relaxed, answering questions without visible hesitation. He claimed he had left the club around 1 a.m. to meet a friend at a nearby bar and insisted he did not speak to Anya beyond a brief exchange on the dance floor. He stated he did not follow her and had no idea she was missing until detectives contacted him. His tone remained even, and he repeatedly emphasized that there must have been some misunderstanding. The interview began to shift once detectives introduced his phone records. The logs showed his device remained connected to towers in the nightclub district until 1:35 a.m., directly contradicting his statement about leaving at 1 o'clock. When asked to explain the discrepancy, he gave a vague answer about losing track of time. Detectives noted the evasion and continued. Traffic camera footage added another inconsistency. A camera positioned near the service road leading to the wooded area captured his car passing at 1:47 a.m. This timestamp placed him near the location where Anya's body was later found, roughly 15 minutes before investigators estimated the time of death. When confronted with this, he claimed he had been driving around to clear his head, offering no reason why he chose an isolated road miles from the club. Detectives then presented the footage of him walking behind Anya. Nolan dismissed it as coincidence, saying he simply left the club and happened to walk in the same direction. His explanation did not align with his earlier claim about heading to meet a friend. Investigators documented the contradictions carefully, recognizing they would be essential later. To test his account further, detectives produced an evidence photo of a torn fragment of dark cotton fabric recovered near the wooded crime scene. The piece had been snagged on a bramble at the edge of the clearing. Laboratory analysis identified the fiber composition and stitching style, which matched a shirt Nolan had purchased earlier that night. Detectives had already obtained the retail receipt through subpoena. When shown the evidence, Nolan stated that many shirts looked similar and that a match doesn't mean anything. His reaction was noted as guarded rather than surprised. The most significant physical evidence emerged when forensic technicians compared the preserved shoe print found inside the shed to boots seized during a warrant search of Nolan's residence. The print from the scene contained a chipped heel segment, distinctive and irregular. When technicians examined his boots, they found an identical chip in the exact position. Photographs and 3D molds confirmed the alignment. This finding directly connected him to the shed where blood transfer had been located. During the same search, investigators recovered a damp towel inside a laundry basket. Presumptive testing revealed diluted traces of blood. Subsequent lab work identified the blood as consistent with Anya's type. Although the amount was small, its presence in his residence created another link between him and the victim. As the evidence accumulated, Nolan's version of events began to collapse. His timeline did not match the recorded data. His claim of walking randomly did not align with his car being tracked near the wooded site. The torn fabric matched his clothing. The shoe print matched his boots. And the blood on the towel could not be explained by coincidence. Detectives continued to question him, but he repeated his denials, insisting he had nothing to do with her. His statements grew shorter, and he became less cooperative. Investigators recognized the pattern. The more evidence they introduced, the less consistent he became. By the time the interview concluded, detectives had enough probable cause to move forward. They prepared an arrest warrant supported by the forensic findings, the timeline reconstruction, and his contradictory statements. Just as they finalized the paperwork, the lab delivered the last pending report. The DNA recovered from beneath Anya's fingernails had been fully processed. The results provided the final confirmation detectives needed to proceed. The final laboratory report confirmed what investigators had suspected from the beginning. The DNA sample recovered from beneath Anya's fingernails matched Nolan's profile with statistical certainty so high that analysts described the probability of error as effectively zero. This result established that Anya had made direct physical contact with him during the struggle that preceded her death. With this confirmation, detectives moved immediately to execute the arrest warrant. They arrived at Nolan's apartment early in the morning. He answered the door appearing tired but composed. Officers served the warrant, restrained him, and began a methodical search of the residence and vehicle. During the inspection of his car, technicians performed a seatbelt tension test on the front passenger side. The test showed recent load-bearing patterns indicating that the belt had been pulled across an occupied seat within the relevant time frame. This finding contradicted his repeated claim that he had been driving alone after leaving the club. Technicians also collected soil samples from the car's rear tires. Under laboratory analysis, the mineral composition matched samples taken from the wooded area where Anya's body had been recovered. Investigators noted that while soil transfer alone is not definitive proof, in combination with the established timeline and surveillance records, it added another piece to the chain of evidence placing Nolan at the disposal site. At the station, detectives began a formal interrogation. Nolan's statements shifted multiple times. He initially denied following Anya at all, maintaining that the surveillance footage had been misinterpreted. When detectives confronted him with the DNA evidence, he shifted to a different explanation, saying he had only followed her to apologize for their interaction inside the club. He claimed they spoke briefly near the alley. When pressed for details, he changed his account again, saying she became upset and that an argument took place. His final attempt at an explanation was that she fell and hit her head, a claim that could not be reconciled with the autopsy findings. The medical examiner had documented clear signs of manual strangulation, defensive wounds, and bruising patterns showing she fought back. None of these injuries aligned with a fall. Detectives informed him of this discrepancy. After hearing the forensic conclusions, Nolan went silent and declined to elaborate further. Prosecutors began assembling the case file immediately. The foundation rested on several independent categories of evidence. Surveillance footage established that he was consistently behind Anya from the time she left the club until the location where her phone stopped transmitting. Physical evidence linked him directly to the shed in the vacant lot, the chipped shoe print, the strands of hair matching Anya, and the blood transfer pattern. The torn fabric recovered near the wooded area matched his shirt, supported by the purchase receipt obtained through subpoena. Biological evidence confirmed a struggle between him and the victim, with her fingernails containing his DNA. Geolocation data placed his car at the wooded disposal site within minutes of the estimated time of death. The case proceeded to a grand jury. Witnesses from the nightclub gave statements describing Anya's discomfort with Nolan's advances. One bartender recalled that after she left, he appeared frustrated and was seen pacing near the bar before heading toward the exit. These accounts helped establish motive and behavioral context. Investigators reviewed all reports for any indication of another individual's involvement and found no credible evidence pointing to a third party. Every trace aligned with a single suspect. With the evidence cohesive and mutually reinforcing, prosecutors charged Nolan with second-degree murder under state law. This classification reflected malice, demonstrated by the assault and disposal of the body, while acknowledging the absence of premeditation. The charge set the case on a direct path toward trial, supported by a forensic and digital record that left little ambiguity about the sequence of events leading to Anya's death. The trial attracted significant public attention from the moment jury selection began. Media outlets noted the contrast between Anya's uneventful life and the abrupt violence she encountered during what should have been a routine walk home. Prosecutors focused on presenting a clear, chronological reconstruction of the night, relying heavily on digital evidence. Their opening statement emphasized that the case did not depend on a confession or a single witness, but on a layered set of objective findings that all converged on one conclusion. The prosecution started with the surveillance timeline. They introduced the boutique footage, the exterior club camera, and the interior recordings in sequential order. Each video segment showed Nolan following the same path Anya took. Investigators had synchronized timestamps from different systems to demonstrate that the recordings were consistent with each other and aligned with the cell tower data from both phones. This sequence established that he was directly behind her at multiple points and had no credible explanation for why he remained in her proximity for the entire route. Expert witnesses then addressed the forensic evidence. A footwear specialist testified about the mud-tracked shoe print recovered inside the shed. He explained that the chipped segment on the print matched the chipped segment on one of Nolan's boots, using side-by-side imaging and 3D molds. A forensic biologist presented the results of the finger scraping analysis, confirming the presence of Nolan's DNA under Anya's nails with a statistical certainty that far exceeded normal thresholds for courtroom acceptance. Analysts also compared soil taken from the rear tires of his vehicle to soil samples from the wooded disposal site, describing the mineral composition and organic content that linked the two locations. The medical examiner provided an account of Anya's injuries. He described the evidence of manual strangulation, including bruising patterns on the neck, fractures consistent with compressive force, and the lack of injuries that would indicate an accidental fall. He also identified defensive wounds on her forearms and hands, aligning with the presence of biological material recovered from beneath her fingernails. He stated clearly that none of the injuries could be explained by a stumble or misstep and that the trauma required deliberate physical force. The defense attempted to challenge the investigation by raising questions about possible misidentification on the night of the incident. Their theory suggested that the individual seen on the boutique footage might not be Nolan, despite the facial comparison and clothing match already in evidence. They also raised the possibility of DNA contamination. However, the state's forensic experts explained chain of custody procedures, the controlled method of collection at the medical examiner's facility, and the statistical improbability of cross-sample transfer under those protocols. The defense did not present alternative suspects and had no independent evidence contradicting the timeline. During cross-examination, prosecutors highlighted inconsistencies in Nolan's earlier statements. His claims about leaving the club at a certain time conflicted with the phone records. His explanation for being near the wooded site was unsupported by any communication logs or corroborating witnesses. His claim that Anya fell was directly refuted by the autopsy. Jurors heard that every key point of his account had already been disproven by objective data. The prosecution concluded by presenting a consolidated timeline analysis. It demonstrated that at every crucial moment leaving the club, passing through the district, entering the alley, reaching the vacant lot, and arriving near the wooded area, Nolan and Anya were in the same locations within minutes of each other. There were no unexplained gaps where another person could have intervened. The combination of digital tracking, physical evidence, and behavioral observations created a continuous, unbroken chain connecting him to the crime. After closing arguments, the jury deliberated for 7 hours. They returned a unanimous verdict of guilty on the charge of second-degree murder. At sentencing, the judge referenced Anya's vulnerability, the sustained nature of the pursuit, and Nolan's refusal to accept responsibility despite overwhelming evidence. Under state sentencing guidelines, he received a term of 28 years to life, with eligibility for parole only after serving the mandatory minimum portion. As the courtroom emptied, investigators noted that the case had been solved not through a dramatic confession or a single critical clue, but through a series of small, consistent digital and forensic traces that, once combined, revealed the final minutes of Anya's path and the actions that ended her life.